email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Joining me today is Geoff Clawson, VP of Product, Websites, and Marketing at GoDaddy. He has 20 years experience in digital solution delivery, product, sales, marketing, e-commerce, and leadership, culminating in the opportunity to empower entrepreneurs everywhere as VP at GoDaddy. Geoff, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hey, Clint. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I can't wait to get in to talk about your role at GoDaddy, but I got to tell you first, I was looking at your bio and realized that you were a part of Birdwell Beach Britches. And man, I was 16 years old in Charleston, South Carolina all over again and loved those things. So talk a little bit about your connection there.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. I'm super proud to be a co-owner of Birdwell Beach Britches. And for a time, actually just before joining GoDaddy, I was the CEO and acting CMO of Birdwell for about 5 years. And I came to Birdwell as originally an investor and owner. A group of us were lucky enough to buy the company from the family that had run it since it was founded in the early 60s. And you know, as a lifelong lover of birdwells, like yourself, I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Texas, but similar experience getting to see and experience that product early on as a surfer. Learning from the elders in the tribe that were all Birdwell guys. I really appreciated the product. And so the chance to be associated in any way, much less be an owner and help really modernize it and bring it to more people was such an amazing privilege. And it's fun to connect with customers, to have them come up to you. And if you're wearing, a Birdwell shirt or board shorts at the beach, whether it's someone in their 60s or 70s reliving, their teens, or it's, someone in their teens that just appreciates going back to the roots of where, surf culture and board shorts really started, which is, Birdwell is kind of a grandfather of the industry.
And if you don't know, Birdwell, the thing that makes them, I think, really cool. First of all, I hadn't fit into mine for decades, but I still think about them in a positive way. But they were just so cool. They work so well. They dry off quickly. I'm a big scuba diver, and every time I go to Grand Cayman, Captain Nick is the guy I dive with, and he always has on his Birdwell board shorts. And just so talk about a little bit about the design and what makes them unique.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll start with just the founding of the company. It's female founded. It was a mother, Carrie Birdwell Mann, who had children in Newport Beach, at the beach, surfing and playing in the water. And at the time, board shorts weren't nylon. They weren't four-way stretch material. They were canvas shorts. And when they got wet, they were heavy, and a lot of people joke that they were called sinkers because they tended to pull you down. And she was just a really thoughtful, innovator, and saw in Newport Harbor the sailboats with spinnaker cloth as the sails, and thought, well, those could make great shorts, and clearly they hold up to the conditions of being out at sea. And so she used spinnaker cloth for those first shorts. And the real ingenious thing was that she made it 2-ply. And so there are 2 layers of then spinnaker cloth. Now what we use is surf nil, a proprietary nylon. So it's a little lighter, a little softer, but still very strong. And those 2 layers rub against each other instead of rub against you when you're paddling or kayaking, or just being active out in the water. And they're just incredibly tough, and as you said, fast drying because of the nature of the fabric itself is naturally DWR, water repellent. And so that combination is a magical combination, and they're still made in exactly the same way, and they're lifetime guaranteed. So for the rare time when something fails, the Birdwell is right there to fix it. And all of those things are part of what, drew me to it as a consumer, but also as someone who wanted to be associated with the brand and help bring that type of product to more people.
Well, in the vernacular of today, as far as rubbing against each other, not you, if you know, you know. Let's leave it there.
That's right. That's right.
And it sounds like you've expanded the brand a bit. It's not just board shorts. And I know I read somewhere that I think J. Crew had tried to buy them, but was not successful, and you guys were. So that's a major attribution to you guys.
Yeah. I think, it's the story of right place at the right time, but also, I think just really being humble and kind of committing to the family that had owned and run it up until that point, that we were going to be stewards of the brand, and we care deeply about, the core group of customers, a big part of which is lifeguard crews all around the U.S. and in Hawaii, that we were committed to maintaining the quality of the product and the family name, essentially, that we took that seriously. And so, yeah, it is one of the things that I kind of wear as a badge of honor to have been associated with that brand, and to have done a small part to help grow it and bring it to more people. And as you said, we definitely expanded beyond board shorts, but board shorts is still, I think something we're most known for. So it's definitely. I think there's probably not a week that goes by that I'm not wearing some Birdwell at some point. So.
Well, I'll leave you one last thing, and then we'll get into the real meat of the interview here. But I think it's better that it went to consumers and users of the product as opposed to just somebody who said that would be a great fit in our bubble of products, and instead it was really acquired by people who love it and use it all the time. I think that's the better way to go.
Yeah, I will say we had the privilege of connecting with Mickey Drexler, who was the chairman and CEO of J. Crew at the time that they wanted to buy it. Who has since moved on, but who is a really thoughtful leader and someone who understands retail and consumers very well. And I learned a ton from the opportunity to talk to Mickey. And it was also kind of satisfying that the little guy got the thing as opposed to another big company just scooping up a small guy. So yeah, it's score one for the independents, I suppose. And really, it's also a function of a point in time in history, 2015, 2016, where small guys really have a fighting chance to digitize, to take what was an offline business and bring it online and find customers, tell their story, make people believe and trust that this product is something they want to try. And once they get into their hands and use it, it's for the most part, we like to say you either have never heard of Birdwells or you love them. There's not really much in between.
I would 100% agree with that. Right out of high school, I joined the Navy, and I was stationed in Orlando for a little while, which is odd place to be in the Navy because it's landlocked. But close by is Ron John Surf Shop, so that's kind of another one iconic thing that kind of takes me back. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about your backstory. I always like to treat the guests on the show like superheroes. Every superhero has a backstory. So tell me a little bit about yours.
Sure. Well, as I had mentioned earlier, I spent the formative years, the first kind of 20 years or so of my life in Texas. Grew up on the Gulf Coast in a super small town, 20,000 people, not quite one stoplight, but not much more. And went to college just outside of Austin at Southwestern University, a small private school in Georgetown. Then also a kind of one stoplight town, but the whole Austin, region has completely blown up. And so,
yes,
if I would have had the prescience to buy, a couple of homes, probably for like $20,000 each back at that point, it might be a very different conversation you're having with me. But no, it's an amazing privilege to have, grown up in small town Texas, connected to, family and just that kind of rural upbringing where, it was in the late 70s, 80s. So we were feral, we would just wander, the 500 acres of cow pasture behind our house, not seen until dinner time and perhaps later. So, definitely a different existence, but one that certainly shaped who I am. As well, I grew up with family members who were all service members, veterans of Vietnam. My dad went to Vietnam as a Marine. His brother did. Both my grandparents, my grandfather was in the Coast Guard in Salerno, and then a Marine at the Chosen Reservoir. And my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was an underwater welder in the Navy. And so, that influence was certainly also prevalent in terms of just the way we were raised, a little bit boot campish, one might say.
Yeah, his experience was definitely different than mine scuba diving. I'll put it that way.
Well, yeah,
being an underwater welder.
Sounds like down in the depths of the ship, nowhere, hopefully near the water. He was outside the boat welding and taking fire while they were doing it. So he had some. He didn't tell that many stories, but when he did, they were harrowing. So deep respect for for those who served in my family and elsewhere, yourself included. So first 20 years in Texas, and then just out of college, on a kind of a whim, made a road trip to the Bay Area with a friend who was moving for a job. My contemporary of mine, recently graduated, moving to the Bay Area for a job, and just wanted companionship on the road trip out. And I said, sure, why not? I got out of the car and it was June. So 115 degrees in Texas, and it was like 72 degrees in Oakland. And I thought, this is amazing. What I didn't realize life could be this sweet. And it was the .com madness. And so, late 90s, just so much going on. And it's not that I didn't kind of have a sense of it going on, but it wasn't until I was there and starting to meet people that just right away, just the kind of intellectual curiosity and excitement of like anything is possible, like the internet is being born, and nobody knows, like, it doesn't matter that you don't have 40 years of experience or even 10 years, like this is all being made up right now. And that was intoxicating. And so I literally went home, quit my job, told my roommate, who also was my brother, my older brother and best friend, that I'm moving, which was kind of a troubling thing to think about. Ended up being actually quite easy of a conversation, and packed up and moved to the Bay Area and never looked back. I've now lived in California longer than I lived in Texas, and I like to say I'm native Texan, but spiritually Californian. And, a big part of that was the formative years then in the Bay Area, where so much, creation was happening. And then the .com, the .bomb, the .bust, right? And so to have lived through that kind of down cycle, and then I actually ended up getting into the financial services world, which was a little bit of a refuge from the .com, implosion. Or I thought it was, and it was up until 2008 when that whole industry came apart. But I got to see that kind of from the inside and learned a ton. And and so just an amazing experience in the Bay Area. At some point, realized I had been coming down to LA to just visit friends and family and surf and, have a different kind of version of California, which is very much not in the Bay Area. And eventually it started feeling like, well, this feels more like home than the Bay Area. And so made the move down to the LA area in 2012 and have been down here ever since, and really, really, feel like it's forever home with great friends. And fortunately, given the kind of Zoom existence and remote work possibilities that exist now, I get to work for an amazing company like GoDaddy and do that from the beach.
Except the beach in California, the water is not the same as the water in Texas, temperature-wise.
Very fair, yes. But nor right now it's about 5 to 6 foot waves that are really fun to surf, whereas maybe it'd be surfable in Texas right now, but likely not. So I'll trade it. I'll trade it here for sure.
Yeah, my first experience was in Laguna Beach, and I'm from South Carolina, born and raised, and so I go to the beach in Laguna Beach and go jump in the water, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not what I was expecting. So
yeah, it's a brisk 66 degrees Fahrenheit right now in the water. It gets up to kind of low 70s though, and when the sun is shining, you can be out there all day and feel good in your bird wells. And I like to joke, as a co-owner of a board short company, I do feel a responsibility to maintain board short only protocol until it dips down probably below like 65. That's when it's like, all right,
Okay.
I need a wetsuit, at least a wetsuit top, if not like a full suit, because your teeth start chattering and it's really kind of hard to have fun for more than an hour.
You're like an 8-year-old kid again. Are you cold? No. And your teeth are chattering.
Exactly. I have a 4-year-old, almost 5 actually. Next week is a 5-year-old, and that's exactly him. Every time we're at the beach, he's blue. His lips are blue. He's chattering, and I'm just like, "So are you done? You want to keep surfing?" He's like body surfing and boogie boarding, and he's like, "No, just one more." So I love it.
Like father, like son.
That's right. That's right.
So tell us about your current role at GoDaddy. What's the most rewarding part of your current position?
Yeah, so many things, but I think if I were to kind of boil it down to the two most rewarding things about my position, it's knowing that we build products that save our customers time when they're running their business, and that we help them grow by making it easier to find and engage more of their customers. And that's especially meaningful to me, that the saving small business owners time, because I'm a former CEO of a small business, and I know how hard it is to find time to do anything other than run the business. And that's for someone with the experience I have as a marketer and a technologist. It was still difficult for me to find the time to, run marketing campaigns and, update the website. And so, to make that easy, from establishing an online presence all the way to, growing your customer base through SEO and email marketing and search and social advertising, like the fact that we make it secure and simple, like one-stop shop to grow your business, like that is deeply rewarding to me, because I know how hard that is.
Right. There's no greater education than doing it yourself. So you felt the pain.
Man,
we appreciate that.
And and I've worked at big companies, small companies, private companies, public companies, in a bunch of different roles. And without question, the hardest thing I've ever done is run a small business and know that, again, as we were talking about, that I had a personal connection to this brand, this company, the family that started it, its customers, and the team, right? That are all ultimately counting on you as the leader to help make the right decisions to grow and to get that product in front of more people, because we believe in it so much. And so there's just no point at which you don't feel like the stakes are high, in the best possible way. And so, it was certainly the most rewarding thing I've ever done, and the most challenging, pretty much consistently, day in and day out. So to try to make that easier for people, like one of the things that drew me to GoDaddy was the idea that I could take that experience combined with all of the the other experience I had at places like JP Morgan Chase and Facebook and Instagram, to take all that and fold it into a product that could then scale to hundreds of thousands, millions of small business owners, that even if they have just like 1% easier time as a result of it, like I know what that means. That means they have more time at home with their family, or they can hire the next employee, which is meaningful when you go from 1 employee to 2, right? Or 2 to 4, like that's life-changing. And it's life-changing for the business, but also for that next person that got hired, right? I mean, they now have a job that they didn't have before. And so, and we're talking, the small businesses that we serve, they're really micro businesses, right? They are the hair salons in your local community, the pizza shops, the barbers and the plumbers. I mean, that we have bigger customers, but many of them are those really small, solopreneur micro businesses. And so you can also imagine, it's easy to imagine. In fact, I do this in my local community, connect with our customers who, they are the mom and pop shops, right? Like they are the people who decided, I don't want to do the corporate life, or I've had enough of that, or I don't want to sell to, the big business. Right. I want to run this myself. And so to build products together with, my other colleagues who run other parts of the business, to offer products that make that job any easier.
Sure.
at succeeding as a small business owner is deeply satisfying.
So let's shift and talk more about some leadership values. On your LinkedIn profile, you actually listed quite a few in your bio: people first, mission driven, servant leadership, extreme ownership, which sounds interesting, system thinking, transparency, and optimism. So those are your leadership values you've listed, and kind of walk us through how you develop those and how they impact really your day-to-day decision making.
Sure. Thanks for taking the time to read those. Certainly, 20 plus years of mistakes and learning from other people, many of whom much smarter than me, some of whom made mistakes that I didn't have to because I got to watch them and learn from them. And ultimately, I think the way I developed those is really taking the time to reflect and internalize, lessons learned at the end of a week, the end of a project. When you transition out of one role into another or move on from a company, really just taking the time to say, what just happened? What did I learn? What worked? What didn't work? And figuring out ways to apply that. It also may be helpful for your listeners to maybe hear a little bit more about what I mean by each one of those. Is that interesting?
That would be awesome.
Just to talk
Yeah,
about?
please.
Yeah. So because you went down the list and people first. Okay, well, what do you mean by that? I feel like the number one job of a leader is to acquire, develop, and retain the best talent, because talent makes anything possible. And so if you do nothing else, focus on the people, good things can happen.
Correct.
If you don't, I read somewhere, I think it was a kind of a joke about, a leader with no one following is just a guy on a walk. Right. So it really does come down to to solve hard problems, to do big things. You cannot do it alone. You have to do it with people. And so people first, always. Mission driven for me, it really, the connection, real deep connection starts with why, why a team or a customer should care about your brand, your product, or as a team, why they should care about solving problems for that customer. Right. And so, mission driven, I think is such an important motivating force for good, that for me, that's essential. Having worked at a place like Facebook with such a grandiose mission, when I was there, it was to make the world more open and connected. It was something that I definitely believed in. And then for us to empower small businesses and to radically shift the economy in their favor, that's a really powerful thing, and it's a job that's never done.
Right.
And so it just keeps you pushing and striving for more. Servant leadership. This is a principle that I think more people know, but really, it was impactful for me early on in my career. This idea of it's not about top down. It's really about bottoms up. My job is to empower the team with a clear vision, with the resources they need and the trust to do their best work, and enabling them by removing the obstacles out of their way. Right. And so my job as a leader is to be in service of the team. And sometimes that looks like, ordering dinner if we're working late, right? Cleaning up the work area just to declutter. It can look like so many things. And that kind of leads, I think, a little bit to that extreme ownership, which is nothing is someone else's job, and there's just a high bias towards action as one of the highest order principles. And so, I feel like the more team members see the world, or the problem space as there are no boundaries, this isn't my job function only does this, or we only think this way, that extreme ownership is let's go solve the problem.
Right.
Systems thinking is, again, that's a principle that I think more people know. As a former engineer yourself, I imagine that's something that you spent a bit of time thinking about. But for me, it means, how the whole affects its parts, and at the same time is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So just the interdependence of how we solve problems from a team standpoint, from an architecture standpoint, and just kind of thinking holistically that way. And then I guess to round it off, transparency and optimism. Transparency, in my view, information flow builds trust and allows the best to be better. I think we've all probably seen those in our career that are more like information hoarders, and they think that they're going to grow their significance. I'm sorry to say that I spent quite a bit of time in the financial services world and ran into more than one leader who felt they got the juice from knowing all the things and being very conservative and sharing that with the right people, or only these people at a certain time. And it didn't take long for me to see that was just getting in the way of great teams being better, and the best people being better. And so that transparency, I think, is a super important principle. And lastly, optimism. You can't be an entrepreneur if you don't wake up every morning thinking tomorrow, today is going to be better than it was yesterday. There's always a way to figure out the hard problems. Because, even when you're successful, sometimes, especially when you're successful growing a business, the problems just keep coming. They get bigger and harder. And so you've got to be optimistic. Otherwise, you're not really going to want to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I feel like the waves are always coming across the bow bigger and bigger. And so you have to be optimistic. And sometimes it's gallows humor, right? Because, well, my glass is half full. It's fully full of salt water, but it's still fully full, right? So,
and here, have a big gulp, by the way. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that optimism, out of all of those, I feel like the thing that has probably served me the best is optimism, is believing that we can find a way, and imbuing the team with that idea that, I know we can figure this out, right? Like and tomorrow is going to be better than it was today. That we're going to just keep getting better.
Yeah, I think the two that have served me the best are the first one and the last one. I definitely am people first, always have been, even as a kid, and just optimistic, about the future. No matter what's coming at me, doesn't mean you never get down. It just means that you wake up the next day and go, and we're going to get it done today. You just keep pushing forward.
That's right. Yeah, I would agree. Same. The first and the last. The others are important and have been an important part of like my own learning and leadership kind of value set. But if you force me and you only gave me one or two, it would be a clear choice for sure.
I think those are all great. When you talked about transparency, I think the first person I interviewed on the podcast a couple years ago was Keith Ferrazzi, who was a New York Times bestseller, I think 3 times over, but his first book was called Never Eat Alone. And there's an anecdote in there where he talks about, he was asking a guy out in California, he was asking a guy for help that had the connections, and the guy said, no, because that's my connection. And if I use it, it won't be there, when I need it, if I give it to you. And he didn't realize that it's not how it works. It's not like a one-off. Like your guy who says, I have all the knowledge. If you share that knowledge, it doesn't mean you're less valuable. It means you're more valuable. And it's a mindset really to shift that, I think.
I couldn't agree more, and have had that experience, both on the receiving end and the I think encouraging others to tap those connections. And obviously, it's most times it's not what you say or ask, it's how you do it. And so I think being thoughtful and engaging that network and doing due diligence and showing that you care and that you're respectful and that you're going to use people's time wisely and thoughtfully, I think that makes all the difference in the world. But yeah, the never getting anywhere, like you're never going to get anywhere by never asking for help, right? And success doesn't mean I didn't ask anyone for help, right? That's a short-sighted, very myopic view in my view.
Well, that wraps up part 1 of my conversation with Geoff Clawson, VP of Product, Websites, and Marketing at GoDaddy. Coming up in part 2, we'll discuss the best way to empower teams.
The best way to empower teams is through making sure they have clear direction, the tools they need, and removing the roadblocks, ideally before they ever arise, so that people have the best chance to do the best work of their careers.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.